Here are two more of the birch species on your list for today. This one is a yellow birch and has really distinctive coppery yellow bark that will begin to exfoliate just like the paper birch bark does at a relatively young age, like this one. This tree is only about 3 inches in diameter and has already got the classic yellow birch bark that's peeling off. This one's also really good for starting fires. So if there's no white birch in your woods, but there's yellow birch, you can grab a little bit of these strips of yellow birch bark and also have a handy campfire starter. This tree growing close to it is a black birch or a sweet birch. Looks very similar. The black birch won't exfoliate. It never begins to do that peeling and curling of the outer bark. It has the same lenticels though, right? I'll move in a little bit closer. Right, so birches are kind of characterized, especially when they're young, by these horizontal lenticels on the bark. So both the black birch and the yellow birch have those. Both of these can get to be rather large and canopy dominant trees. In fact, the yellow birch, I'll show you some later in my woods, is part of one of the northern forest types that's called beech birch maple. So it's American beech, yellow birch, and sugar maple. This is kind of a classic definition of the northern hardwoods forest in the northeastern part of North America. They're both alternate branched, simple leaves, and the leaves are similar, but they do have some distinctiveness, right? So the yellow birch leaves are kind of what we call doubly serrate, and I'll show you what that means in a minute in a separate video. The black birch leaves are also finely serrated, but usually single serrated, here's a good example, or only kind of intermittently double serrated. And by that we're looking at that there's large teeth all around the margin separated by smaller teeth at regular intervals. And so on the yellow birch you'll see that pretty clearly. One neat characteristic of both of these is that they both have a really strong wintergreen smell. If you scratch the bark or if you break a twig off and scratch it and sniff it, I've done that with both of these. And so all you need to do is take a little twig, scrape away the outer bark, and sniff, and you'll get a strong smell of wintergreen. And most people say that the black birch or the sweet birch smells even stronger of wintergreen than the yellow birch. In this case, I really detected that, where the black birch had a much stronger smell than the yellow birch. Sometimes I don't get that in the woods. But that's true on a little twig like these that I've broken off. It's also true if you were to just take your pocket knife and drill a little hole in the bark and get to the inner bark. You'll smell it even on a tree that's 15 inches in diameter or more. You'll smell that wintergreen smell on the inner bark. And so that's a really good diagnostic if you have a birch sapling, right? So if these things were only, an inch in diameter or less, the yellow birch, the black birch, the white birch, the gray birch, and both the Australia and the Carpinus that we're going to see all look basically alike when they're that small. The leaves are very similar, and if it's winter or early spring and you don't have leaves, it can be very difficult to tell those species apart because they'll all kind of grow together like these are, or at least in similar places. And so that wintergreen smell, if you were able to break off a twig and sniff it, if you get that wintergreen smell, you know it's either a black or a yellow birch. If you don't get the wintergreen smell, then it could be any of the other birch species. But it's a useful diagnostic feature.